So I'm very excited to have this sort of clash between them because I think that's where the real learning happens. So I'm Catholic, so I think I'm personally pro-life, but I've always supported pro-choice policy.
Abortion is an important reproductive act.
Somehow that a woman's, her rights have to be at odds with a child's. I want to fully and wholeheartedly reject that notion. True women's empowerment cannot come through the bloodshed of our children.
I haven't formed all of my political beliefs yet. I really do want to learn from both sides. I think
Even if you don't think it's worth your time, I think people will always remember that you sat down and listened to their opinion, even if you completely disagree with it. I think the line already forming before, even a half hour before the event starts is just a testament to the values of discourse that all these people embody and want to uphold.
The outcome of these two polar opposites is almost never conversation. It never changes anybody's mind as far as I can see. People who came in with the idea that abortion is wrong in all circumstances, a sin, whatever they want to call it, and that women have a near unrestricted right to decide whether to continue a pregnancy or not, pretty much leave in the same place that they were. This has been going on for a long time, and I hope that I don't bore you tonight by repeating the same arguments that are consistently made by people on my side of this issue and people on the other side of the issue. So in my journey, and my journey includes participating in abortions for the first 3 years, 1970 to 1973, I ran an abortion clinic. I ran an abortion organization, and I engaged in politics. And then I became a Catholic for a free choice. I don't use the term choice generally in my work because choices are about butter and margarine. What we're interested in is matters of life and death. We are interested in very serious, complex moral decisions. And I've come to the conclusion, having done work on both sides of this question, with people of very different stripes, in countries all over the world, that we need to begin to think about abortion as a conflict of values. I tend to favor more or think more about the value of women's lives. And when I say lives, I'm not talking about whether they're going to die or not. I'm talking about the fact that they have a life, they have decisions to make about how they are going to live that life. They have illnesses and they have health. They have children. They have husbands. They have partners. And they think. And that value becomes especially important if and when they become pregnant, particularly when they didn't intend to become pregnancy at that point in time. They have big decisions to make. And no one really can say the only decision they can make is to carry the pregnancy to term, whatever it means for them and their life, or the best decision they can make is to exercise their right to end the pregnancy. And I'm in that group of Catholics who look at the idea that a church can change, even the Catholic Church can change. We learn new things. We didn't learn much of the science we're living with today. We didn't know it all. We didn't have a theology of animals. Now we have a theology of animals. We weren't worried about climate. Now we're worried about climate. We're worried about trees. We're worried about life in a much bigger sense than we were a long time ago. And people who were gay, lesbian, transgendered, were in the closet. Openly, we hope, among us. How are we going to deal with that? That's a decision about whether you're going to have a baby or you're going to end a pregnancy. You are going to terminate a pregnancy. You are going to end the developing life of what would emerge as a new person. Those are the questions that every woman who gets pregnant, not every woman, because some women know exactly what they're going to do, and they are very happy with what they're going to do, but where most of us have to think about what is the right thing to do. And the answer to the question, and the question, what is the right thing to do, is the most important question we face as people. We face it in so many ways. What is the right thing to do about poor people? What is the right thing to do about how we spend our money and how much of it we give to others who have more need than us? What is the right thing to do about how much meat you're going to eat? Those are comparable questions to the questions of what you're going to do about a pregnancy.
I want you to think back with me a few weeks ago. There was a news story in Lexington, Kentucky. The police received a call about a newborn child. When they entered the home, they discovered a baby boy. He was dead. He was wrapped in a towel. He was stuffed in a black trash bag and hidden in a closet. His mother, a 21-year-old college student, admitted that she had given birth and then tried to erase every trace of him. She has been charged with abuse of a corpse, tampering with evidence, and concealing the birth of a child. This little boy's life ended in the dark, discarded like trash, as if he had no worth at all. The coroner confirmed that he was a boy, and his cause of death is still under investigation. But whether he died at birth or just after, he was not just a pregnancy, not just a fetus. He was a son. Some call it only pregnancy loss. Others insisted that he not be referred to as a baby. Why? Because they fear the truth. To name him is to admit his shared humanity. A child was hidden in a closet, his humanity denied. If this does not grieve us, then what will? This is what choice over life looks like. When choice of adults is made supreme, not of the children, life of children of the vulnerable become disposable. What about the child's choice? That has not been represented here yet tonight. And so let me ask the question here plainly. Should murder be legal? Should murder be legal? Of course not. Then why do we excuse abortion? Abortion is the direct and intentional killing of an innocent human being. It is not an accident. It is the direct and intentional killing of an innocent human being. That is the reality behind euphemisms like choice and healthcare. What does abortion actually do? Abortion procedures tear babies limb from limb in suction abortions. In the abortion pill abortion, it starves a child to death with drugs. In later term abortions, it pierces a needle into the beating heart or the brain of a living, developing child. These are not acts of healing. These are acts of killing. Every day in this country, nearly 3,000 children meet their fate by abortion. That is nearly the number of lives lost on 9/11, repeated every single day. The case against abortion is simple. It is wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being. Who here agrees? It is wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being. I hope my esteemed debate partner would also agree with this, that it is always wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being. Abortion intentionally kills an innocent human being. Therefore, abortion is always wrong, and it must be illegal. Because the baby has value and deserves a choice, the ability to live. There are only two arguments typically used to justify abortion. We're going to categorize them, and some of them were touched on by Ms. Kissling. First of all, there is an argument made that the entity in the womb is somehow not a human being, that they're lesser than us here in this room, which I believe is definitively science denial. We'll talk about this more in a minute. Number two, the other category of argument for the killing of abortion is that sometimes it is okay. Sometimes it is okay to kill innocent human beings. There are some justifications for it, and we will examine those as well. My esteemed opponent today, Ms. Kissling, wrote this in the Washington Post in 2011. She writes, "We can no longer pretend the fetus is invisible. We must end the fiction that an abortion at 26 weeks is no different from one at 6 weeks. We need to firmly and clearly reject post-viability abortions except in extreme cases. That is wrong. The baby at 6 weeks is just as valuable as the baby at 26 weeks, or the toddler at 2 years old, or the adult at 26 years old. Any other lines that we may draw are arbitrary and inherently dehumanizing. Justice demands consistency. Killing preborn children must be illegal for the same reasons that killing born children, a newborn, must be illegal. Because our human value, our worth, is not based on our size, on our age, on our level of development, or on our location or dependency. Even Justice Harry Blackmun, who wrote the majority opinion in Roe v. Wade, admitted that if the personhood of the unborn could be established, the case for abortion collapses. And science, let's talk about the science. Science leaves no room for doubt. It doesn't matter your religious beliefs or your lack of religious beliefs. The science is clear. Science affirms that human life begins at fertilization. From the moment of conception, a new, unique, and whole human being exists. This is not a matter of an opinion, but of observable fact. History is full of moments when humanity was denied and the consequences were catastrophic. And in every case, the humanity that is denying the rights or the value to the other has more power. They have more strength. They have more ability to dominate. The Nazis called Jews Untermenschen or subhuman. Der Untermensch, a 1942 pamphlet ordered by high-ranking Nazi Heinrich Himmler, described Jewish and Slavic people as morally degenerate, uncivilized, subhuman. Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels decried Jewish-led international subhumans and their threat to his German culture. This wasn't just rhetoric. This was the logical prelude to mass genocide. The Nazis had an official policy that Jews, the disabled, and others were considered life unworthy of life. And as we know, over 6 million were exterminated in the Holocaust. Today, ongoing dehumanization exists not only of our unborn here, but of children across the world, including places like Israel and Gaza. In 1860, over 3.9 million African Americans were enslaved in this country. Entire families, men, women, and children were treated as property, not people. The Supreme Court of our country, in Dred Scott v. Sanford decision of 1857, said that black men and women were, quote, so far inferior that they had no rights which the white man was bound to respect. That judicial lie about their humanity paved the way for brutal oppression. Frederick Douglass, who escaped slavery, exposed its evil with this piercing clarity. He says, quote, the slaveholder, in order to justify himself, and by the way, his justifications include his economic rights, his ultimately his convenience, his property. In order to justify himself, quote, must prove the slave to be a brute. He must deny him intelligence and rationality and dispose of him as a beast. Douglass tells us the soul of the injustice. When you strip a class of people of their humanity, you open the door to every kind of violence. Since 1973, the reason I'm here today, the reason I have been advocating and debating people like Miss Kissling and others and working to expose the truth on abortion, over 63 million children in the United States alone have been killed by abortion, have been denied their humanity, their value, their choice, have not been given a chance. The pattern has always been the same. Strip away the personhood, redefine human beings as something that is less than, and then commit atrocities in the name of someone else's progress. Abortion is the latest injustice, and it follows the same dark logic. Miss Kissling spoke of women. She spoke of the importance of women. This was a reference multiple times in her opening remarks. I think she was getting to this point about bodily autonomy, although she didn't state it directly, but I do think bodily autonomy matters. I'm a woman, I'm a mother, I have 3 children of my own. I know what it is to carry children, to birth children, and your bodily autonomy as a woman matters. But my bodily autonomy as a woman and another person's bodily autonomy per se as a man does not give us the right to destroy someone else's body, especially not the bodies of children. Especially not the bodies of our most vulnerable children who have no voice. you'll recognize that while we are here, Ms. Kissling and I, both women speaking, there's someone here who is not represented in the room because they cannot be. Children. Children who have no voice. A newborn child can only cry. An unborn child, you can't even hear them. They are completely silent. For many of them, their vocal cords are not even developed yet. And so it is so easy for the strong to dominate the weak in the name of our own pursuits, our own values, our own ideals, and to forget their value. But they have value. All humans have value. All humans have equal value, and they all deserve to be protected and cared for. It was indicated by Miss Kissling that in some way she seemed to suggest that because there wasn't a direct argument made for abortion by Miss Kissling, I have to acknowledge that. She sort of made ancillary comments and statements and sort of indicated that pregnancy was something men wouldn't want to have because it, perhaps is so burdensome to women, it's so unique to women. And there was a lot of comments that she made. But this idea that I would like to address, that somehow that a woman's, her objectives, her empowerment, her rights have to be at odds with a child's. I want to fully and wholeheartedly reject that notion. True women's empowerment cannot come through the bloodshed of our children. And the Dublin Declaration is a representation of the thousands of medical professionals from across the globe. And it says specifically that it is never medically necessary to take a child's life via direct and intentional abortion in order to care for a woman. Abortion, the direct and intentional killing of a child, is never medically necessary. I want to quote Dr. Anthony Levatino, a former abortionist, now a pro-life advocate, a friend of mine. Dr. Anthony Levatino, who committed thousands of abortions, he also ran his own abortion practice. One day, his daughter, he and his wife wanted very much to have children. They were able to adopt a little girl. They were thrilled. And one day, he was having a dinner party at his home. The children were playing in the front, and his daughter was killed by a vehicle that ran off the road. And he tells a story very movingly. He went back to his abortion practice the next day or week after the horrific and tragic passing of his little girl. And he said for the first time as he was removing the leg, you see in most late first and second trimester abortions, you have to do dismemberment and you have to remove the baby piecemeal. And as he was removing a leg off of a child that he was dismembering alive, these are live dismemberment abortions, he pulled this leg out and he looked at his child's leg. And he said, all I could think was of someone else's son or daughter. All I could think that this was someone's son or daughter. He was so moved to be having this moment to see the humanity of these people, these humans that he had been destroying for money, that he decided to leave his practice. He would later go on to explain that when he became a life-saving doctor and worked with high-risk pregnancies to save lives, he said, in my career, I have saved thousands of women's lives by delivering their babies. But when people ask me how many I saved by performing an abortion, this was after he rejected that practice, I tell them that the number is 0. He worked in Upper New York in a high-risk pregnancy clinic, working only with high-risk pregnancies. These are the cases that are often used to justify elective abortion. You need to have an abortion because you have a high-risk situation. There's life-threatening issues. And he's saying with proper medical care, which is what women deserve, you do not need to kill the baby. You care for both. The whole purpose of this debate society is to talk about what does the future look like? How do we make a better future? How do we make a more just and loving future? How do we do that? We can't do that on the broken bodies of children. Any child. We cannot do that. The future must be life first. That is the only way forward for a nation that cherishes justice. It is the only path forward. Life has to come first. And so I ask you tonight to stand with children. Stand with the preborn, the most vulnerable among us, who cannot vote, who cannot speak, who cannot defend themselves. They need you. Women and men, they need us. They need our voice, our courage, and our love. Choose love, not violence.
So you have presented a very serious problem. The number of abortions that is happening and the traumas that result from those abortions. Should we put those women in jail? I mean, seriously, I'm not fooling around. I'm not kidding. And men and doctors who are performing abortions or having abortions, and this is a horrendous act on their parts. They're killing babies. What do we do?
I think there's a lot that we should be doing. I indicated some of the things. I think there should be better cash credits for parents starting at before birth from the government. I think that there should be more support for pregnancy resource centers and federally qualified centers that don't provide abortions. I think that birth should be free. I don't think birth should cost anything. I think birth should be free. And I think that child support should start in the womb. It should not start at birth. It should start in the womb.
Are you aware? Okay, I mean, one of the things you are an expert in is having visited clinics, seeing things that go on in clinics that perform abortion that are wrong, that are inappropriate. Are you at all aware of what goes on in pregnancy counseling centers of similar nature? Because if you're not, I'll tell you.
I'm privileged to have volunteered, Ms. Kissling, at many pregnancy resource centers over the years. My husband and I are blessed to be able to financially support pregnancy resource centers. We help fundraise for pregnancy resource centers, and I'm extremely proud of the work that is done. These are nonprofits that don't receive any government funds. They are run without any financial incentive for the people running them. It's completely charitable work. I did not say they were perfect, Ms. Kissling. No human is perfect, and no organization is perfect.
What you know about what? Because I can tell you, and then maybe you can go and you can investigate them. What about the clinics?
Let's say this. At pregnancy resource centers, there are children that are not being dismembered alive as they are at abortion clinics. At pregnancy resource centers, there are resources being offered pregnant mothers that are not being offered at Planned Parenthood and abortion clinics across the country.
I'm with you.
And at pregnancy resource centers, there's free and confidential support and adoption referrals that are being offered that are not being done at Planned Parenthood.
So you have never heard.
One more thing, Planned Parenthood has been receiving until just 2 months ago, thank goodness, they've been receiving $500 million a year in taxpayer money
You understand
to do that.
that this is a way of avoiding the question. Instead of answering the question, what you do is you talk about what somebody else is doing that is wrong. Now, have you ever heard of I looked at some.
What question am I not answering? I take that seriously.
Are you aware of pregnancy counseling centers that are opposed to abortion who do anything inappropriate in their clinics?
Yes, there are. I am sure that in the world of the nonprofit space of pregnancy resource centers, there have been mistakes that have been made because that is human. Yeah, I'm sure there are mistakes that have been made. But again, these are resource centers that are giving away hundreds of millions of dollars in free support to low-income women. That's who you're fighting against, Ms. Kissling. That's what they're doing. And I think they deserve our respect and our support. Ms. Kissling, you talked about the value of women. And you didn't use the word rights, but you talked about their abilities to make decisions and choice. I mean, the resolution is choice versus life. Do you think that children in the womb have any value?
Yes, I think that they do.
How so?
I think that all life has value, and it would be inappropriate of me to say that suddenly fetal life has no value. What that value is complicated. They have the value of being. They exist. That is enough to give them value.
What about the newborn? Would you say that the newborn child, because it has less autonomy and less consciousness, has less value in your worldview than the adult woman who has her full faculties, maybe in education and everything else?
No.
No. And why is that?
Because it's born.
So you're attaching the value to birth, not to consciousness.
I think that in some instances, yes.
Why? Why is birth the defining?
No, why is consciousness would be the appropriate.
Well, you just seem to indicate that because the newborn, in your view, has the same value as the fully conscious adult woman, they're the same, though.
There are things that can be done for a newborn who is no longer in the body of a woman that cannot be done for that entity, that fetus, that embryo, which is inside her body. There is that in and of itself is an important distinction. location.
So would it be your position then that because the baby in an unborn baby's situation, of course, they're in the body of their mother, that the mother then should have the, I know you'd like the word right, but should be permitted to, at any juncture, at will, have an abortion?
At any stage of pregnancy.
Yeah, because
No.
they're in the womb. But
No,
you're saying
I'm
that they're
perfectly happy, for example, of the framework that originally was developed in Roe v. Wade. The framework was very simple. It was in the first trimester, a woman can make the decision to have an abortion for any and no reason. And there was a debate about what it meant. In the third trimester, the only reason abortions could be performed were to save the woman's life or her health. And the movement for choice is split.
And do you agree with that framework?
I think
Your
that framework.
That's your framework. So then in the case of those second trimester abortions, in your view, you're saying that those abortions should be permitted provided there are certain things taken into account. The woman meets a certain threshold in your view.
Correct.
So what is the difference between an embryo towards the end of that first trimester, 11, 12, going into 13 weeks, and a embryo turning into a fetus at the beginning of the second trimester? What, in your view, is the moral difference that in one case it should be not permitted to kill the baby, and in the other case, for any reason you stated, it should be permitted?
I think that the difference is the stage of development of the fetus.
So just to be clear, so by that standard, it sounds like you're saying, if I understand you correctly, that developmental abilities confer more value or rights, legal protection.
Oh, right.
Okay, well, not use that word. I know it's not a good word for you. Protection, more legal protections. That more developmental abilities for the unborn child confers gradually more legal protection. Should this be the case for humans at all different levels of ability? So should the newborn child have less legal protections than the adult man?
Wow.
But that doesn't follow your original standard. You're changing the standard. You're changing the standard.
Related to two things: the existence of the womb and the location of the fetus or child within her. That must always be part of the consideration. Once the fetus is born, the consideration for the woman, it's no longer in her body. The woman has no need for those protections. I'm thinking about this question or this belief that every human life is of equal value. And the fact that for some of us, we focus the specificity of that point on fetuses. But the reality of the world in which we live in, through Gaza, through the Ukraine, and onward relative to that, is that every human life does not have equal value. It should it have equal value? Yes, in a way, it should. But then you get into philosophy, and you get into thought experiments. A little bit into a thought experiment, and I'll close with that. There's a fire in a building with only time to save one person. In one room, you can save a few people, alternatively. In one room, there's a poor family of 6 people. Never had anything in their lives, never have been cared for, have not had good education for their children, etc. And across the building, in another apartment, this is not a new experiment. I mean, it happens all the time. And it happens in real life. There's a doctor. One white guy doctor who is, everyone knows this doctor is that both families are white. I'll do that much. Okay. Everybody knows that this doctor is 3 weeks away of a cure for cancer. I'm asking you to think for yourself about how much you really believe and how much you act and how much all our governments act within the principle of every single life. I'm going to include all the little baby fetuses too. Every single life has the same value as the other life. And I'll give you one more little, and you believe, greatest good for the greatest number of people. Good principle, greatest good for the greatest number of the people. Do you go in and save the family of 6, or do you save the doctor? That's it. That's my vote.
To be human should be enough. To be human should guarantee you value in a human society and should guarantee you these same fundamental legal protections as other humans in a society. And in our society, we are governed by a constitution that has a 14th Amendment, which declares equal protection under the law for all, not for some, but for all. And has been discussed this evening, some of the greatest human rights abuses have been perpetuated because of the dehumanization that has been pushed on certain groups of people who are seen as subhuman or less than. And any time we draw a standard, to draw a line, to say you are less than human because of your abilities, because of your skin color, because of your beliefs, because of your age, because of any distinction, we open the door, we commit great abuses. Our society can only stand if we acknowledge fundamental realities about what the human person is, who the human person is, and the rights that they deserve, the legal protections that they deserve. This evening, there have been largely 2 categories of arguments on behalf of choice. And by the way, the resolution has, I believe, a problem in how it's framed, in that there is no choice for the child. So if you argue for choice, you are arguing against a lifetime of choices for that child. A lifetime of choices for the child. But the 2 categories, one has been consciousness. But it has been made clear that there are humans that have little to no consciousness. Maybe they are in a coma, or it is baby Jax, who only has a brain stem. And yet it is never right to intentionally take Jack's life. And so then the argument moves to dependency. Well, Jax can be protected even though he lacks most of his brain function. He lacks largely consciousness. Jax should be protected, but only because he's born, right? This is the argument from the side promoting abortion on demand. And so dependency becomes a standard. The child is dependent in and upon the mother. The child needs the mother. But this standard also falls apart because the reality is we are all dependent in one way or another. And at birth, we are as dependent as before birth. Without nurture, without care, without nourishment, we will die on our own as newborns. And yet we provide, and it seems even the choice side is providing full care for the newborn, full legal protection for the newborn, and yet no legal protection for the child before birth at certain arbitrary standards. And yet the only difference between those children are their level of development and the degree of dependency. But the newborn is dependent. And I have a responsibility as a parent. Both men and women have responsibilities to their children, whether they feel inconvenienced or not, whether they feel burdened or not. This is the social contract that we must live by if we're going to have justice in this country, that there is a responsibility that the strong have to the weak, and that it is never acceptable to take the life of someone who is weak and dependent. It is never acceptable to take the life of an innocent human being. The choice before us is clear. I believe that if we continue to permit the violence against our most vulnerable, unborn children who have no way to advocate for themselves, protect themselves, if we continue to permit the bloodshed of almost 3,000 deaths every single day, boys and girls, just like us, whose lives were cut short, our nation will continue to devolve into violence and into injustice. If we want a brighter future, if we want justice, if we not only want life, but a lifetime of choices, we must not pit the woman against the child. And we must give the child the same rights and the same protection that all of us have enjoyed. Imagine with me this country if instead of applying our focus on whether or not we can kill the child, we instead discuss how we can help the child and the parents and build stronger families and a better society and culture. Imagine if that was the conversation of the evening. We must get away from the injustice of violence against the vulnerable and the weak and move instead towards a future that sees every human person as valuable, as promised equal protection under the law, and as worth fighting for. Imagine what the brilliant minds of Yale could come up with to form a stronger social contract, a better system for how we care for our very young, for how we care for women, for how we provide health care. Imagine the world that we could create together. Thank you so much.